The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports. You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs.
All right, Clint, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. We mentioned the offensive line again. We all know how we feel about Carson Beck's performance. You know how this podcast feels about the way Mike Bobo performed in this game. You also know the way that this podcast feels about Arian Smith. And so there's no need for us to revisit any of these topics.
Long-time listeners of the podcast know I have one name that I will never utter again in my entire life because of a blown coverage. There are now two names.
We're up to two.
I will not ever repeat.
We up to two. So there's no need to belabor the points on the offensive side of the ball any longer, but we didn't spend too much time on the overreaction show talking about the defense. Maybe not enough time. We did mention that Josh Heupel only mustered up 17 points. Has never scored 20 points against Kirby Smart in the history of his career. We did mention that Tennessee was held to 7 points after the first quarter and 0 points in the second half. We did mention that the game plan and the adjustments and the coaching edge check, all went to the University of Georgia in this matchup. Kirby Smart has been outcoached. Glenn Schumann has been outcoached multiple times this season. He did not get outcoached. Now, the game plan coming out of the gate was solid, and Tennessee, to their credit, was able to sustain a couple of early drives that were lengthy and just slowly and methodically move the ball down the field. We have long since said on this podcast, Clint, that is not the way that you're going to beat Georgia. If you can't generate any explosive plays, you're not going to be able to beat this Georgia team. Tennessee had exactly 0 explosive plays in the game, really only attempted a few downfield shots. Credit to Georgia's safeties. I mean, I thought really the players of the game on the defensive side of the ball were KJ Bolden and Dan Jackson and Malachi Starks. Like, those guys played exceptionally well, Clint.
Micah Williams did fine. Jalen Walker did fine. The defensive line did fine. The cornerbacks, once we switched out, were fine. They all played in their lanes. They played their positions. We blitzed a few times. We've already given flowers to Christian Miller, who on the play in which Smile Mondon coming back, we probably didn't talk enough about Smile Mondon's play. He'd probably be the fourth. The three best were the safeties, and then the fourth was Smile Mondon in there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because his athleticism and speed, the threat of that changed everything. Christian Miller
Which was
steps
great
up.
to see, by the way, because we'll get into the safeties in a second, but Smile, even before the injury, Smile's play, a little bit of the shine had come off for whatever reason. I think the CJ Allen emergence and these true freshmen going into true sophomores now. And then you got guys like Chris Cole coming along and everybody's excited about them. I think there's a little bit of like the Smile Mondon had become a little bit of the forgotten guy.
We had a great thing, and we had forgotten just how great of a thing we had in him.
Yeah, well, he reminded us.
He reminded us in a great deal.
Right.
But the three safeties, we said last week, we needed Malachi Starks to possibly play a little star closer to the line. We saw Dan Jackson take a little bit of that. We saw KJ Bolden take a little bit of that. It was really more of a last year's three safeties with Dan Jackson and the Smith brothers back there. It was a little more reminiscent of that. Aguero, by the way.
John and Michael were back at safety. Is that what you're saying?
They were not.
Not those Smith brothers.
No, not those Smith brothers. Those guys are keeping us safe from a lot.
Those brothers do know best. Just so
those brothers know best, and go check out that
know
pod.
best. If you Google that, I think you'll be happy with
They're
it.
They're going to keep you safe from dehydration. Is what they're going to keep you safe from. Okay.
Water, M-dubs. I'm still waiting on that water. So you're not keeping everybody safe. I'll tell you that right now.
The three safeties. Aguero did not play the star position at all this game.
He was in. I noticed him one time, and I was not happy about it.
Neither was the coaching staff. Him and Humphreys are sharing a doghouse. The cubicle and the door in that forgotten wing of the office is shared by them, and they're not going to be coming out until they understand. But KJ Bolden stepped up his game. Malachi Starks, I thought, played an exceptional game in coverage. I saw him breaking on the ball many times, getting in between lanes.
Physical tackling too from Malachi Starks. Physical tackling.
The thing that I was going to say, speed has never been a question with him. He can close the gap very quickly. It's when he gets there, is he able to bring the pain and bring the hips and tackle? And I thought he did a great job in this game for what he was asked to do. Fill in the alley. Dan Jackson, I think, missed a couple of tackles, but disrupted the play enough that other guys rallied around and did just fine.
Just a quick question from the gallery. Did he miss them fast or slow? When he was missing those tackles, was he moving quickly or was he moving slowly?
I don't care. Dan, you keep being you. I'm nitpicking now. That's what I think is phenomenal. Dan Jackson went from a walk-on forgotten safety to now I am nitpicking him for missing tackles that he should make because he is coming down, flying down, and not being cautious, not being safe, not second guessing, coming flying to the football, which is what you want to see out of every single one of those defenders. And we're seeing it a great deal. And I think, again, the other thing I saw that we should not miss is the health of this defense getting more and more. Smile Mondon's presence is going to change. I anticipate a change at cornerback for the foreseeable future. I think Harris is going to be in there for some time unless something drastically changes.
And the rotation at corner, I think you're going to see it continue to decrease. Unless something goes awry, I don't see Ellis. I mean, Ellis Robinson is going to get a lot of run this week. Okay. He's going to get,
here we go.
Everybody's going to get a lot of run this week. So I'm fine with that. But in these big games, I think it's Dalen Everett and Daniel Harris. I think that's what's going to be gone with. I think this coaching staff knows that we are better when Dan Jackson, KJ Bolden, and Malachi Starks are all on the field. And so
that's our best defense.
Unless you're in the dime, those are your 5 DBs. Those are the guys that are going to be on the field. When you're in the dime package, you're going to throw Aguero out there. Maybe you're going to bring, Julio back in for those plays. Georgia doesn't run a lot of that. And so I think that's what you're going to see. And then you're going to continue to see those 4 guys rotate at inside backer, CJ, Raylan, Smile, and Chris Cole. And I think you're going to continue to see that rotation. We know what we are up front. And so not only is the defense getting healthier, Clint, but I think solidifying who they are and where they belong, the continuity is really starting to show.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. You could bet on Monday Night Football. The Houston Texans travel across the state to face the beleaguered Dallas Cowboys. 7-point favorites at Jerry World. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Saturday night was a tough one, a gut punch for BYU fans.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars.
The BYU, for the first time seemingly all season long, did not play what they have been calling complementary football. 2 sides of the ball felt like they were playing complementary football. Those would be the special teams and the defense. You look at the statistics, they're undeniable. I'll just, Greg Wrubell threw this out, and I'll quote him on this. How good was BYU's defense in this game? Well, they allowed Kansas to a season-low 242 yards. The previous low was 319 yards. A season-low 73 rushing yards. A previous low was more than double that at 151. A season-low tying 17 points scored. A season-low 13 first downs. The previous low in that department was 17. A season-low 52 plays overall. See, the previous low was 54. And then a season-low of 33% third down conversion percentage. Previous low was 42%. BYU's defense was outstanding on Saturday night, and rewatching the game ingrained that in my head. It was absolutely a joy to watch BYU's defense do what they did against Kansas. Outside of that opening drive that Kansas went 84 yards and scored that opening touchdown, BYU just absolutely locked the lid on Kansas and did not allow them to do anything really of significance. The other touchdown they scored came on that fluke play, the quick kick that went off the helmet of Evan Johnson, and it gets recovered on the 3-yard line. They punch it in for a touchdown, and that ends up being the game-winning touchdown. Crazy things happen in the game of football, but BYU's defense did more. I mean, more than its fair share to help BYU in hopes of getting a victory in this game. Special teams wise, nothing. There's nothing in the special teams that screamed to me that BYU failed in that department. Yes, they have had games where they've gotten touchdowns out of special teams, but those are essentially like a cherry on top of anything else. There was nothing in the special teams that hurt BYU. So where does the blame go in this loss for BYU? Well, there's a third phase of the game, and it's the offense that cost BYU in this one. Rewatching the game, yes, there are play calling issues. There's execution lacking. Jake Retzlaff's quarterback play at times left a lot to be desired. But the biggest thing to me is there was a statement made by Chase Roberts in the postgame press conference that he said all week long in practice, BYU had struggles scoring, especially when it came to red zone practice type stuff. And when you say that, that tells me everything I need to know, it feels like, about this game, because BYU got in what I like to call the scoring zone. What is that? It's 30 yards and in. Traditionally, the red zone is 20 yards and in. BYU had 5 trips to what I term the scoring zone. That's the 30-yard line and in. 4 of those inside the 20, so inside the red zone. 2 of them inside the 10-yard line. And how many points out of those 5 trips does BYU get? A possible 35, just 13. That is abysmal. That is unacceptable. And it is absolutely something BYU must, and I mean must, rectify when they go into this matchup against Arizona State on Saturday night. You cannot and you will not win many games scoring just 13 points, especially when you get into scoring territory as often as they did and come up empty or come away with just 3 points. It's got to be better. And for Chase Roberts to lift the lid on that in the postgame press conference, very revealing to hear him say that we had issues scoring in practice, because I am a firm believer that you play the way that you practice. And is BYU's defense taking it too hard on BYU's offense? It shouldn't be that way. But here's the thing. BYU's offense, have they bought into their own hype? Did they eat the rat poison, as Nick Saban liked to talk about? Did they read their own press clippings and feel like, you know what, we got this thing on lockdown? They got a major slice of humble pie, and that goes across the board, from Aaron Roderick to the other assistant coaches to Jake Retzlaff to BYU's offensive line, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Everybody involved with the BYU offense has to take a look in the mirror and go back to the drawing board and understand that they aren't, quote, all that. They've got to get back to doing what they were doing to have success early this season. There have been games that BYU has put up 30 points this season and made it look relatively easy. There's been other games like this most recent one where they have made it look like a slog on offense. There's no ready-made answer for me. I know, trust me, my social media feeds and the comments, all y'all want Aaron Roderick fired. Great. You can want that all you want at this juncture, but let's also remind you, BYU's 9-1, and I'm not sure that I've ever seen a football program anywhere fire their offensive coordinator after a 9-1 start. I know that's going to come off as me being an apologist for Aaron Roderick. So be it. I'll say unpopular things. That's part of this job, as I prognosticate and also analyze BYU football. They have a great opportunity going to Arizona State this week. It's going to be a tough game. Cam Scattaboo and the rest of the Arizona State Sun Devils, they are licking their chops thinking, all right, we got a wounded animal, speaking of the BYU Cougars, coming to our hometown down there in Tempe, and we're going to upset them. We're going to punch our ticket to the Big 12 title game on the backs of that win. What does BYU have to do? They have got to buoy themselves up. They have to find answers, and they have to get back to work this week. Stop it with all of the interactions out there when it comes to the national media, because I don't think those are going to come this week. When you drop your first game of the year, suddenly nobody wants to talk to y'all. And that should help BYU refocus and hopefully re-energize themselves, particularly on offense as they get ready for Arizona State. What else did I take away from BYU in that loss? Well, there's some good in there because, as there always is, there's not a game where you can't find a single positive out there. But the simple fact of the matter is, for the first time, I feel like all season long, BYU's offense did not uphold their mantra of playing complementary football. You had two of the three phases doing their part in playing complementary football, and the offense, it did not do its job. That needs to change, because if it doesn't change, BYU can find themselves quickly on the heels of a 2-loss slide and suddenly find themselves relying on tiebreakers and having to rely on other teams out there to get them to Arlington. So, bad news, offense was not good against Kansas. Zero doubt about that. There's blame to be shared across the board. Jake Retzlaff missed opportunities with his throws. Aaron Roderick, some curious play calls. I also thought there was execution issues offensive line-wise. The false start from Connor Pay late in this game is he's still checking the alignment when that snap is called for by Jake Retzlaff. It's inexcusable. It went from 4th and 6 to 4th and 11 and all but sealed BYU's fate. Those are critical errors, and it really did in BYU's hopes of another late comeback win. And the pressure should be off them now. So now that, like I said, they've got to refocus and get back to work and hopefully have a much better week of practice offensively and hopefully start scoring a little bit when it comes to their practice opportunities, because once again, I think that translates directly over to when you take the field in real live game action.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKED ON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Phil Longo has been let go as the Badgers head coach or offensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers.
Phil Longo has been let go as the Badgers offensive coordinator effective immediately. We are going to talk about in this show what that might mean for the quarterback room, what that might mean for the rest of the season, who might come next, big picture thoughts. Guys, I feel like we all thought this was going to happen. I didn't expect it to happen in season, though. Guys, where are you at on this?
Yeah, I'm really shocked that it happened with 2 games left in the season. But I think it's a very bold move. I think Fickell's clearly, put it down saying, look, like, we need change and we're doing it now. I think there's it brings up a lot of questions as to why it's happening right now. Does that mean that, Luke Fickell really wants Mabry to start the next 2 games? There's a lot of discussion about that. I think that, there's just so much to unpack here, but it's not a surprise that it happened, but it is a surprise that it happened with 2 weeks to go. I think one of the most interesting things is, like, it's going to, and it should energize the team. Like, what does this do for the players in the locker room that may have been out on Longo? And you've got 2 very winnable, very big games to finish off the season strong, to go 7-5, which is a big deal to me. It's a big deal to all of us to be able to have that streak continue. More importantly, the future of this program now. For 23 games, we've been watching the Phil Longo experiment just not really work, except for a couple games. So to actually now look ahead, you talk about hype, you talk about excitement. Now all of a sudden we're looking at what's next for the Badgers. And Luke Fickell made a decisive move. I give him credit for that. And this is going to be a very interesting week for this team.
Yeah, I made a point on saying this on our show, Rajiv, that this, to me, at this point in time happening, makes me question whether he has his guy in mind. Because if you have somebody in mind, why wouldn't you just finish out the rest of the season and make the change in the offseason? This, to me, is let's get out in front of it and give ourselves an opportunity to make it, everyone aware that we're looking, and see who's out there and see if we can attack this quickly and get our person in line for next year. I could be wrong on that. It could be that there's some other questions on there. Mabry, as you kind of brought up, might be part of the deal here. I honestly think that Locke lost the locker room last night. I think the level of play that was in that game, it was clear to me that people were extremely frustrated with how poorly he played. And the offense as a whole, I thought, outside of him, played well enough to win that game. And he just wasn't able to execute. And if there was some dissension there between Fickell and Longo in terms of making a change there, I look at it and I'm like, what do you have to lose? Like, if that's the level of quarterback play that you're getting, that is, like I said in ours, we saw that stat line. That stat line actually made him look like he played better than he actually did in the game. And he was awful. Like, he was 12 of 28. Like, he should have had another pick. He had a ball he had a fumble to start the game that isn't really taken into account. And he was completely ineffective. Like, there's nothing, you can't tell me that you can't at least use Mabry's mobility to do some positive things on offense.
Will Hannah says, unfortunately, no truth to the rumor that he will be replacing Longo. A couple of things, like Rajiv, you hit on it too, and Justin, you and I have talked about Mabry as well. Rajiv, you hit on it, like excitement, right? Remember how excited we were for Longo. Remember how excited we were for Phil Long, because we all were. That was looked at upon a home run hire who's going to get quarterbacks. Look at what he's done. I think we need to be very clear on this. This is the most important hire of Luke Fickell's.
Oh, absolutely. He's out if he misses on this.
He gets one more shot. He gets one more shot at filling this OC with something that's going to bring back Wisconsin identity, have an identity on offense. This is it. Like, he missed on Longo. Okay, do it now. Get it right. Take the time to get it right.
Because ultimately, you're right, decisive move. But this is also on Fickell for hiring the wrong OC.
Yep.
Like,
absolutely. That's why you get one more shot.
So, like, decisive move, I agree. I don't know how much is solved doing it 2 weeks left in the season, but either way, I'm good with it. This passing offense is 14th in the Big Ten by a number of metrics. Phil Longo wasn't brought in to revamp the running game. He was brought in to revamp the passing game. He was brought in to bring our quarterback, our throw game into the modern century, and it is de-evolved with Phil Longo. So this was a move that had to happen, but boy, Luke Fickell, man, you have to nail this hire. And as we all say,
that makes it so interesting, because you look at this, and the fact of the matter simply is he's probably not going to get super risky with this. We've talked about it from a Gino Guidugli, and I don't see that happening, because he's just not proven enough. And Fickell has to have somebody that has some cachet, so to speak, in the offensive coordinator realm. And he also can't afford to take a risk on somebody that he doesn't know and trust. So it's going to be really interesting to see who he goes out there and hires, unless he finds somebody who, like, I hate to say it because that's what Phil Longo technically was, somebody who has proven themselves already. I keep seeing people drop Moorhead as a potential guy out there. He's a possibility. Joe Moorhead is somebody I could see them potentially thinking about, because he's done it in the Big Ten and been productive before. The question is, he's also somebody who has a tendency to jump ship the second a better offer happens. And I think if you're Fickell, you want somebody that's going to provide some stability too. You don't want somebody that, if he has one great year, might, turn that into a job somewhere else as a head coach.
Well, you also want somebody who has, we talked about this before. Let's shift to quarterbacks quick. I think that's maybe the next question. What happens to the quarterback room? I think the locks are gone. If I'm just being honest, I think we talked about it before the show. I don't think younger Landon Lock is coming. I think Braden Lock might move on. Mabry Mentor is the interesting one. Two-part question. I want to kick it to you guys. A, does he start next week? Does Mabry Mentor start next week? And B, do you see him around next year?
I think he does start next week, just because I think we talked about it on our show. We were already thinking about whether or not he should be starting next week, given the horrific performance that we saw last night from Braden Locke. And I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I think he starts, and I think he is on the roster next year, because Luke Fickell needs to take his time with this. I don't think we need to make a super conservative hire. Like, we need to really take our time. There's a lot of young offensive coordinators are out there. There's a lot of teams doing a lot of cool things. Really need to find someone that fits the identity of this team. And if Mabry's a part of that, then Mabry's a part of that, because we haven't seen him yet. We don't know. We were hyped about him coming in. He's certainly more mobile than Locke is. I want to see him out there. You've got nothing to lose at this point. Put him out there. Like, yes, we have those 2 games that we could potentially lose, but we don't have our coordinator anymore. There's zero reason to leave Locke in the starting lineup at this point. Pull him out. Let's get Mabry in there, and let's see what he can do. And I think that'll go a long way in determining if he's going to be here next year. But certainly who the coordinator is and what kind of style of offense Fickell's really going to try to move towards now is going to be the ultimate decider. But I absolutely think he starts.
Well, there are reports, just to get this out there for people that are wondering, that Nate Letton's going to be the guy who's going to be calling plays, which is really interesting, because I'm not aware of him having any previous OC or play calling experience. I know he's been with Fickell since the Cincinnati days. He was a tight end coach there. So it'll be really interesting to see from that standpoint. Clearly there's a level of trust there that he just is comfortable that Letton will do what he expects.
Hey, we've all called plays, Justin. Everybody's played Generation EA Sports.
Maybe that they're playing in the office, and he's like, "I really like the flow you've got going in NCAA football 25." The other thing I will say on that is, listen, it's going to be a really interesting. I think Mabry starts because, like I said, I think that they lost the room in that last game. The last couple of weeks, Locke has just been awful, and I think that there's some things you can do with Mabry in this game that will you can simplify the game a little bit with him. But my biggest takeaway, if we're talking about who he's going to bring in as a potential replacement following this, I think you're going to see somebody who has a dynamic run game that they're going to target. It's going to be somebody that he feels like, listen, we're going to be capable of being physical, but we're also going to have a dynamic enough run game that teams are going to be uncomfortable with us running the football, and we're going to play the passing game off of that, where we're going to have some ability to kind of put defenses into a bind more than Longo's offense did. Because let's be honest, the offense was super simple from a run standpoint, and I think that frustrated Fickell. That what we saw was the teams like Iowa that are super physical. What Iowa decided was, we're just going to be really physical with you, and we're just going to blow up your run, and we're going to let the linebackers flow to it and stop you. And the goal is to create some deception in that run game so that you can't do that as easily, and that you could potentially cause some issues where guys get too aggressive and you get some run or some cutback lanes and stuff like that where you can break some runs. And I think that that's what he's looking for, is somebody that's going to really understand how you need to run offense in the Big Ten.
Well, I think we've all talked about it. Everything was just too simplistic with Phil Longo. It was too easy to scheme against it. Passing schemes were really simple, and the running games were really simple. And it was just like, if we have more talent, it's going to work. But we're not always going to have more talent. We talked about it.
You're not going to be able to out-athlete most of the teams on our schedule.
You got to outflank teams. Like some of the stuff Oregon's, I'm like, not only do they have elite talent, but gosh, I wish we could be creative like that too. You can't have more talent and be more creative, right? Like we have to be able to do one of those two things against an Oregon.
I mean, the fact that we said the word creative, yeah.
Right. But I do want to hit that. Oh no, Rasheed, I think you're hitting on my point there.
Yeah, I was just going to say the number of times that we said creativity on our show, this show, like how the word creativity has been used so much because there was such a lack of it. And whatever happens, we move forward. We better have some creativity. We have to do it.